Lovely avocet. Oh, it's got a bit of an itch. Oh, that feels good.
Oh, right a bit, right a bit. I think I've got it just in time because it's Springwatch.
Hello and welcome to Springwatch 2021, coming to you live from the very beautiful Wild Ken Hill up on the northwest coast of Norfolk. Had a great week up here, I have to say. It started really well. Swallows, some great science about the swallows. We were up last night actively choosing white feathers, which enhances the hatching rate of their eggs. Kestrels have been hatching too. Beautiful just to watch those. We've had, what else? Oh, cobweb beetle larvae that go into cobwebs and still spiders prey. Pretty good, pretty good. And tonight won't be any exception at all. Michaela, what is this?
It's your hand, Chris.
Yes, but it's also the hand that later in the programme will hold one of the most precious of the UK's birds' eggs. Very, very securely.
I hope it was steady then.
Rock
Rock steady.
Rock steady. Now, we have a camera operator just over here, about 100 metres away from where I am. We can have a look at that now. Oh, look, flying spoonbills.
Oh,
that's good, isn't it?
Fabulous, isn't it? These are such great birds. They have the most amazing beaks, don't they?
Yeah,
with
and
that
look, you can
spoon shape
to
at the
identify them.
end.
You're not going to confuse those with little eaglets, another white heron-like bird around here, because they've got their heads stretched directly out. We can go to another live camera now. It's not close to where we're standing, and it's one of those brown hares. Look at that.
I can't believe how still they're being, Chris. I mean, every time we walk in the field, that's it, you just see their ears and they're off.
Fantastic stuff, fantastic stuff. What a great start.
What a good
Spoonbill and brown hair.
I know, it's
Come
not
on.
a bad start, but
Come
we're going
on.
to keep going upwards, that's for sure. We've got live cameras all over this site, and they're not just catching feathered friends, they're catching some creatures with antlers as well. This is what we caught on one of those cameras first thing this morning. It's a roe deer going through the field very calmly. In fact, not just one, two. Now, these are young males, they're bucks, and you can see they're molting and their antlers are growing. It's interesting actually here because we've seen 5 of the deer. We've seen the red, the fallow, the muntjac, Chinese water deer, and the roe deer. So there's plenty of deer on this site.
We're just one short of the whole suite of UK deer, which would be the seeker.
But pretty good, very nice, very nice.
Nice to see those, of course. Now, our plan, if you haven't been watching for the rest of the week, you won't know, but you can surmise that we're doing what we normally do when we turn up to someone. Let's put lots of cameras on nests, tiny little cameras which give us views of these nests completely unobtrusively, where we can learn exactly what's going on. Let's have a look at what we've got on offer at the moment. A rich choice. Kestrels there top left, buzzard in the top centre there, swallows top right-hand corner. Rear view of an avocet, well, you know, better than no view of an avocet. I'll take that, I'll take that. Fantastic stuff. Pied wagtail as well, a whole range of different species, which we can watch and you can watch as well online.
Amazing selection, haven't we? An amazing selection of eggs and nests. Now, you know, yesterday I gave you guys a challenge. I gave you guys a challenge to take a photograph of a cinnabar moth, which is one of the creatures that's on our Springwatch list, that's on the Springwatch website. And you said that that was going to be really difficult for everybody.
You're going to rub my nose in a cinnabar moth now,
Well, I
aren't you?
am actually, because as soon as we said it, we got loads of photos sent in to us on social media. Here are a couple of them. That's Becky, little bit in the distance, but never mind, it's a tick. You saw one, but look at this one. I love this one. Just look at what Amy got. The colours on that cinnabar moth are absolutely amazing.
Yeah, they're day-flying moths and they're very brightly coloured because they're advertising the fact to any potential predators that they're distasteful. But it's not just the adult moth that's distasteful. Here is a photograph of some caterpillars. This isn't a recent photograph, and you can see they too have what we call aposomatic coloration, that warning coloration, very much like a wasp, banded black and yellow. And the thing is that they get their distastefulness, their toxicity, from the plant that they are feeding on, which is ragwort. In fact, cinnabar moths only lay their eggs on ragwort, and they take that into their bodies and make themselves distasteful. But sometimes the moth will lay a batch of eggs on a single ragwort plant, so when the food runs out and they've eaten all of the leaves, they can't migrate to another one. What do you think they do then? What do they eat when there's no leaves left?
I reckon they probably eat each other.
You only know that because I told you earlier.
It was a good
Yes,
guess. It was a guess.
they turn cannibal. So despite the fact that nothing else can eat them, they are capable of eating one another, the cinnabar caterpillars. Beautiful, beautiful
I mean,
stuff.
they look so gorgeous, don't they, as moths? And then you find out what they're like as caterpillars. You could make a movie out of that,
I know.
Steven Spielberg
Zombie caterpillars
movie.
coming your way. But enough of caterpillar cannibalism. Let's head north to the one and only Iolo Williams, who has ensconced himself at the Allerdale Wilderness Reserve in the Highlands of Scotland.
Yes, indeed, here I am up at Allerdale, Chris, and I don't know what's going on, but I've had 2 days of sunshine, which is not like me on the watches. It usually rains, so I'm waiting for the rain. It's out there somewhere, but look at this. How glorious is that? Look at those. Absolutely beautiful up here. And the other day, I promised you that we would keep an eye open for some deer calves, because it's the calving time of year. And we found one for you this morning. Here it is, lying still on the floor there. Rusty brown colour, those spots camouflaged. I wish I could tell you it's a red deer calf, but we're almost sure that it's actually a Sika deer calf. There are a few Sika deer here, an introduced species, of course, but a beautiful little calf nonetheless. But we'll carry on keeping our eyes open for some red deer calves and try and bring you those before the end of the series. And later on, I've got some more very good news for you. But for now, let's catch up with Gillian in Northern Ireland.
Yes, we're in Northern Ireland. We're back at Castle SB Wetland Centre, and we have been trying to keep up with all the action here, and I promise there's been plenty of it. Now, right behind me is one of many black-headed gull colonies. We've got a live camera on that, trained on that right at the moment. They've gone a little bit quieter, but right through the day we've seen them bringing back nesting material. They've been mating. It's been busy, 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 but we have been focused on one black-headed gull in particular, and this of course is Betty, the bird we've called Betty. She's nesting right near the visitor centre, and she's given us fantastic views of her nest, but there's also been some big news that we'll reveal later in the show, so plenty of drama here. How about you guys, Chris and Michaela at Wild Ken Hill?
I've got a feeling we might know what the news is about Betty. We're getting a bit fond of Betty, though. I think we're with Betty. We're rooting for Betty.
We like Betty very much indeed, but we're going to raise another black and white bird because we're down on the marsh here, and about 500 metres over in that direction, we've got some remote cameras on our breeding avocets. Let's have a look at what they're up to at the moment. There they are. You can see them nesting on that little bank of earth between all of the water. Oh, that's great. Look at them there, using those recurved bills, swiping them through the water for microorganisms.
It almost looks like they're on fast forward, doesn't it?
Oh, it's fantastic, isn't it? Look at that. And you can see them swallowing them. Every time they're vibrating their necks, that's when they're swallowing their prey. We've been watching them all week, and they've had clutches of 4 eggs, but look at this. We've been watching them hatch as well. This is probably the first time this young chick has emerged from beneath the incubating adult. It's got a little bit of down stuck on its bill. Do you know what I like here, Michaela? The potential. The potential. This fluffy little thing is going to grow into one of the most elegant and attractive birds in the UK.
It's actually hard to believe.
Might inspire a young ornithologist to a lifelong interest in birds. And look, here it goes. The adult's going to lift its wing and it will sneak back under for the warmth and security whilst it waits for the other eggs to hatch. And they're brilliant at looking after their eggs and young. They're ferocious around their nest, which they hold as a territory. Anything that comes close, I don't think a little egret is a potential predator of any kind, but it's sufficient to excite the ire of an avocet and it drives it away. Not just little egrets. Here, look, a shelduck means nothing at all. It's just, it's just grazing there on the grass. moving closer to the avocet, and the avocet is having none of it. Even here, look, a little bit of broken wing display in amongst all of the flapping and screaming and chasing. But in the end, of course, the shelduck just thinks, well, there's a patch of grass over there without any avocets that are going to annoy me, and it simply moves on. But they're very diligent parents. They do everything they can to make sure that their eggs hatch and then their young can fledge.
I think they're great because they're such elegant-looking birds, aren't
Oh, I
they? But
love
they're
them.
really
Beautiful
sassy.
and feisty.
Sassy.
I'd go out with an avocet.
I think you probably
Honestly,
would,
yeah.
wouldn't you? We've seen plenty of shelducks around here on the marsh, but surprisingly, the one that we've got a camera on, our shelduck, isn't very near this area. Have a look. This is it live, and it's in the burrow at the bottom of that tree. Now, can we see any movement at all in there? The eggs are definitely in there, but we don't know whether the parents are. We have been watching them, and they do go in and out, well, 4 or 5 times a day. Let's have a look. You can see a little bit of movement there. It's both parents, both the male and the female.
Yeah, that's the female. Males have a knob on top of their head, so that's definitely the female.
So that's the female coming out. But you can see she's looking around because she has to be wary. She's very brightly coloured, so she'll attract any predators. So she has to make sure the coast is clear, and very often the male will come back first before the female rushes in to brood those eggs. Look at this though, I like this. These are the Exmoor ponies that are used as natural grazers on the rewilding area, doing their job well. They're very curious. They're looking into that nest. I think it'd be really funny if one of the shelducks flew out now.
Startling the pony.
Startled those ponies.
Now, the thing is that we typically see the shelducks down here on the marshland. That's where they do most of their feeding, of course, or sometimes out on the sea and the mudflats too. But the bird has chosen to nest a long way from here. It's right over here behind us in the woods. So we sent a couple of our researchers, Lucy Hodgson and Jack Badams, out to measure the distance from the nest to the place that the adult will have to lead the brood to make sure that they're secure. And that's an area where there's plenty of water. That's where they'll find their food and also be able to avoid some of the ground predators. So using the measuring wheel, they marched all the way from the nest site down to the marsh. It took them 13 minutes. I imagine it will take the adult shelduck a lot longer to get that brood of youngsters down here, a distance of 860.8 metres. It's a long way for them to come, isn't it?
That's nearly a kilometre, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, that is not a good strategy for survival, if you ask me.
Now, we haven't been able to look down into that nest to see how many eggs are there. It's simply too far beneath the ground. We do know that they lay quite a few eggs. 7 to 10 would be an average clutch. Sometimes, well, the record that we've noted is 17. But what about this? This is a photograph taken by Kane Brides at Martin Mere Wildfowl and Wetland Trust Reserve. I'll save you the trouble of counting them. There are 26 eggs in this photograph, and they are about that big. So they're quite a large egg. How can a single shelduck cover 26 others? Well, probably with difficulty. So what's going on here? Well, this is more likely a case of what we call egg dumping. So another shelduck female has come in and laid some eggs into that nest. Why would she do that? Well, it's a good plan when you think about it. They're ground nesting birds. They frequently get predated. If you can leave some of your eggs in a completely different place, then there's a chance that if you're predated, they won't be, and your genes will get into the next population. It's a simple case, you know what I'm going to say, it's so predictable, of not having all your eggs in the same basket.
Well, that's really interesting, Chris, but I think the grey partridge could trump you, or maybe egg dump you. Could trump dump. Anyway, let's have a look at this photograph, because this is extraordinary. This is a grey partridge nest, and it's laid its own eggs, and on top of that, a pheasant has laid 12 eggs, and then a red-leg partridge has laid another 5. So that's 17 eggs on top of her own clutch. I mean, that's a crazy amount of eggs for that grey partridge
and they're small
to have
birds
to sit on top of.
Yeah.
It would be like, I don't know, it'd be like sitting on a high chair, wouldn't it? We have our own grey partridge. Let's have a look at that. We've got a live one. Oh, the grey partridge is gone, but you can see the eggs. Look at that. Now we are going to show you in just a second. We're going to count them. We've been watching this nest. We're very lucky to have grey partridges.
Aha!
There's 2 of them in the red clover. And if you look, the nest is right in
Aha.
there. And there she is sitting there, looking so content. And then, as I say, just watch, because she flies out, which gives us the chance to go back into that nest and look at the eggs. And we're going to count, because we know that they hold the record of laying the most eggs of any bird in the UK. There's 13 there, but we do know that she laid 18 eggs, because when our nest finder went in, he counted them. So I don't know. I think they could be underneath, or maybe they've been predated.
Yeah.
Who knows?
I think if any ground predator had found that and taken, what was it, 3, it would have been going back to take the others as well. I
That's
imagine
true
we just
enough.
can't see them.
We've seen that many times, haven't we? But we are going to keep our eye on that nest over the weekend.
Yeah, and it's good to see grey partridge here. They're one of those farmland birds that's gone through a calamitous decline in relatively recent years. And a bit later on in the programme, I'm going to be meeting another one of those farmland birds which has equally declined but is well on its way back thanks to some fabulous conservation efforts. But before that, I think we should head north again to Iolo Williams in the Allerdale Wilderness Reserve.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chris. You can see how beautiful it really is up here. And actually, just over an hour southeast of here is a very different landscape, that of the Moray Firth. And that happens to be one of the best places in the whole of the UK to see bottlenose dolphins. And the best time? Well, now, between late spring and summer. This wonderful footage here was taken by scientists from the University of Aberdeen under licence from Nature Scotland. They've been studying these animals for a very long time. And if you want to go and see them, well, I would suggest that you go there just after low tide, because that's when they're chasing the salmon up, and 18 salmon rivers empty into the Firth, so there's plenty of food for them. And all the research has shown that it's actually a population that's on the increase, which is great news. Roughly around 220 individuals there. But bottlenose dolphins, they're not the only things you'll see in the Moray Firth, actually, because just a few weeks ago, there was a pod of orcas there. Have a look at this. You imagine turning up expecting to see dolphins and you see orcas. And orcas are getting more and more frequent now around the north coast of Scotland, especially places like Shetland and Orkney, off the Hebrides, off the northeast. And this amazing footage was sent in from the northeast of Scotland by Sam Mackay, shows a pod of orcas hunting a seal. Now, out in the open water like that, I'm afraid the seal has got no chance. They're very intelligent animals. Usually the seals seek refuge on rocky islets, rocky shores, on small islands, anything. But in the open water, not a chance. And they got it, and of course they'll eat it all. Nothing will go to waste. That's nature for you. And these northern pods, well, they wander between the coast of Norway, Iceland, the Faroes, north of Scotland, and they can travel up to 100 kilometres in a day. And if you want to see them close in, the best time is between May and August. That's when they come near the coast, and that's when they'll often be seen hunting seals as well, because in winter they tend to move north to the northernmost part of the North Sea and feed on fish like herring and mackerel. But there's an even rarer whale in Scotland as I speak. Yes, in the Firth of Forth, there is a sei whale. It's been there since April the 11th, and it was first seen by Erica Linklater McLennan. Sorry, Erica, if I got your name wrong there. And that is the 3rd longest whale in the world, after the blue whale and the fin whale. And you imagine that in such an industrialised area, you have the 3rd longest whale in the world. Now, they're quite a widespread species, but they're not actually seen here in the UK very often. Since 2007, there have been 29 sightings up in Scotland. So what does a sei whale look like? Well, this is it. It's quite an elongated, thin whale with that swept back dorsal fin there. And the good news is, usually when you see these big whales up an estuary or close inshore, they're usually ill, and the truth is that they usually die. They wash ashore. But this one appears to be very healthy, feeding constantly, and it's there because there's plenty of food for it. So if you live locally, pop down and have a look and get a sei whale on your tick list. And the moral, I think, is no matter where you are now around the UK coast, keep your eyes open. You never know what you're going to see. Right, let's hop over to Northern Ireland again and catch up with Gillian, who's looking at some of the birds at Castle Espy.
I certainly have, Yolo. Yes, on Tuesday we were looking at some of the characters that call Castle Espy home. And there was one character that we've all taken a shine to, that's Betty. Now we've watched her protect her eggs through driving wind and rain, but the storms have passed, as they inevitably do, and the sun came out, and this is what we saw. Here is Betty. Now she's there on her own little island nest, as it were. And as we watched her, she revealed to us for the first time her chicks. Now, she almost looks as surprised as we were when she saw those chicks. But she started off with 3 eggs. One was lost in the storm. There were 2 eggs left. And obviously we didn't want to count our chicks before they hatched, or in this case, gulls, of course. But there they are, obviously enjoying that sunshine, as is Betty. So this is a reserve. However, it's still a dangerous place to raise a family, because this is the sort of scenes we've also seen here. Now this is another chick. This is not Betty's chick. This is from a neighbouring nest, obviously rolled out of a nest and trying to climb out of the water there. This chick is a long way from its own nest, so these gulls do not recognise it as one of their own. And it's tricky to watch, and obviously this chick is small, it's fragile, and didn't survive that. Now this is something else we see a lot of. Lesser black-backed gulls, they swoop over the colony, all the black-headed gulls take flight, and they successfully fended that one off, but this one we saw on the mudflat, and it had clearly taken one of those chicks off who knows whose nest. But yes, it does happen occasionally. So lots of dangers. Obviously, the black-headed gulls, they try and get safety in numbers, but it is a numbers game, and we're really hoping that the odds are stacked in Betty's favour and that she will successfully raise those chicks. We'll be keeping an eye on that progress. So from noisy colonies here on the reserve to a woodland habitat, a secretive woodland habitat, and by night. Not far from the reserve, one of our wildlife camera operatives went and filmed this, caught this amazing creature just before nightfall. Now this is a long-eared owl. These are widespread across the UK, but they do especially well here in Northern Ireland because there's not much competition from other species like tawny owls. Now we have heard 2 birds calling in that area, and of course we will be keeping our eyes and our ears peeled for more activity. But speaking of ears, let's take a look at them. We've got this beautiful taxidermy owl lent to us by Loch Ness Discovery Centre, and it's a good chance to look at these so-called ears because they're in fact feathers. That's all they are, elongated feathers, and they're thought to signal the bird's mood, as it were. When they're down, the bird's relaxed. When they're up, it's alert to danger. And it's thought that the feathers break up the bird's outline, and that, combined with this mottled camouflage, help it to blend in a woodland habitat when it's under threat. So, of course, we will be keeping an eye out for these, but the reason why we know this bird was there is we had a tip-off that that bird was roosting in someone's garden. Now, can you imagine having a long-eared owl in your garden? Well, Jean Kelly doesn't have long-eared owls in her garden in Glasgow, but she does have some very surprising residents.
The first summer we were here, we hadn't long moved in, and we started putting the deck in, and we realised pretty quickly after that that we had something in the garden. So at first we were kind of like, is it a rabbit we've got? And then obviously the burrow's tiny, so it's not a rabbit. And then we started to see them. They would pop up their little heads. When I first realised there was water voles in the garden, I was actually delighted. I was so happy because I thought, you know, the effort that I'd put into the garden, I was quite excited as well because I was thinking, you know, wow, we've got these lovely little animals that are doing no harm at all, just living their best life in this garden, you know, and just by leaving a little bit of extra grass around the edges, putting some nice additional planting in the things like that, you kind of think to yourself, just what little effort is that to help these animals which are so endangered. When people think about water voles, they think about water. There is no water here. The nearest water is a burn. That burn's about half a kilometre down this road. The voles in Glasgow are unusual because they're fossorial water voles, so that means that they burrow under the ground. They live like moles. There's one vole in particular that we've actually named, and we've actually called him Benvolio. He's quite an unusual wee vole. He's got a wee white star in the middle of his head, so it's quite easy to tell it's him. This is his kingdom. So he's set up several little runs and made himself quite at home. Benvolio is quite forward. He's quite bold and quite adventurous. He'll come up to the bottom of the steps. So he'll go up to the door and look in the door. But he'll actually come into the middle of the garden as well. And he'll be quite happy sitting in the middle of the garden without any cover. It's quite sweet when you see him. He's taking a piece of kiwi fruit from just at the bottom of the steps, and he kind of bounds down the garden quite happy, and he's quite delighted with it, and he'll sit in that corner over there. Banana and kiwi fruit are definitely his favourite. You know, you're pretty much guaranteed to see him if you put out a stack of that. So Benvolio is quite a character. He's very bold, very forward, quite a demanding wee vole. He knows what he wants. In this garden, they live underneath the deck. They have multiple chambers. They have a sleeping chamber and they have a latrine chamber. They also have another chamber where they'll store their food. They're very organised and they're very domestic, if you like. If you think you've got a water vole in your garden, you know, you'll probably see the little head popping out. People sometimes mistake them for, you know, your kind of common garden rats that you would get just living in an urban environment. In reality, when you see a rat and you see a water vole side by side, they are actually quite different. When you look at a rat's tails on first appearance, they look hairless. Water vole's tail's slightly shorter. It's more hairy, it's more covered. But I would probably say the most obvious difference for me personally is the ears. Definitely the ears. They're smaller, closer to the head. I think we have water voles like Benvolio in our garden because we're already feeding the birds. We're already bringing in wildlife into the garden. And I think we're just very fortunate the way we've set our garden up to be a little bit wilder. Really, what you're doing is you're encouraging more wildlife, and we need to do that. So whether it be that we're planting more flowering plants, so where we're leaving a little bit of long grass. And if you get kids, there's nothing better than actually seeing these little animals that you would never ever see coming into your garden. Hopefully in future seasons we'll get more voles who are as happy to settle in the garden as Benvolio has been, and maybe we'll get a different name for next year's voles as well.
I love that film. You've got Benvolio living his best life with Gene Kelly in a garden in Glasgow. All you need is Debbie Reynolds, the three of them doing a bit of tap dancing on the deck, and you've got yourself a musical. But no, seriously, it's great. So he definitely chose the right garden, because there's only about 10 gardens that they know of in Glasgow that have those fossorial water voles.
Yeah, there's one thing we need to be very clear about, though. That is that the black water voles that we're seeing in Glasgow and in Scotland are the same species as the brown water voles that we have throughout England, and you can see them side by side here. There's very little difference in size. It really is just the pigmentation of their pelage, their fur, which is different. So the question I know you're all asking at home, that you must have the answer to, is why are there black voles in Scotland and why are there brown ones in the rest of the UK? Well, the answer comes down to glaciation and migration, and I can answer this due to the exceptional work of Brace, Ruddy, Miller, Shreve, Stewart and Barnes, because in the Proceedings of the Royal Society published on the 27th of April 2016, they looked at the DNA of voles all over the UK, both modern and ancient, and in Europe too. And I can tell you that at some stage, all of these water voles, the black ones, were living down here in Iberia, and that's because the ice sheets had come down over this part of Europe. And when they retreated, these voles migrated up through Europe, across the land bridge and into the UK. So at that point in time, all of the water voles in the UK were black ones, about 28,000 years ago. But the ice was still toing and froing, and when it finally retreated after about 15,000 years, it again left just these black water voles in the south of England. They moved northwards and recovered the UK. But then sometime between 12 and 8,000 years ago, before that land bridge disappeared here, brown water voles from the Balkans in the east of England migrated in this direction across Europe, across that land bridge before the ice melted and the seas rose, and they then moved into southern England. So then at that time we had both. We had brown and black mixing together, but for some reason, and we don't know the answer to this, when they hybridised, the brown became the dominant coloration. And as a consequence of that, the black ones these days are only found in the north, in Scotland. Now we are.
Interesting stuff. I think the black ones are really cute. I don't know, they kind of look cuter than the brown ones. Am I allowed to say that? Yeah, I think so.
No, I think they're highly attractive, but it might be just that they're exotic. We all grew up with brown ones.
Yeah, that's true. That is true indeed. Sadly, though, they hold... Oh, are you going to say something else, though?
Go on then.
Shall I say? Because very sad that they hold the title, these water voles, of being the fastest declining mammal in the UK. In 10 years from 1989, their numbers dropped by 90%, which is a catastrophic decline. And there's lots of reasons for that. One is, you know, the change in the way they manage rivers, its loss of habitat, its pollution, and the biggie is the introduction of American mink, which is a big problem for these water voles. The good news, though, is that there are a lot of conservation projects around, so hopefully we'll be able to stabilise those numbers just a little bit.
Even better news is that there are water voles here at Wild Ken, and we have got some cameras out looking for them. We haven't found them yet, but as soon as we do, we'll obviously be showing you. But it's yellow. You're up there in Allerdale, in the Highlands of Scotland, with those black water voles. Why is it that the American mink, which have done such terrible damage to the brown ones further south, are not rampaging through the black morph of the water vole in Scotland?
Yeah, it's very complicated, Chris. It'd probably take half an hour to explain everything properly, but it's kind of a complex relationship between mink, water vole, and rabbits, and basically when all three are present, the pressure on the water voles is light enough to allow them to survive in the uplands. Now, from one rapidly declining species to one that is virtually extinct here in the UK, the Highland tiger, or the Scottish wildcat. It used to be common and widespread throughout the land. Believe it or not, the last Welsh record is 1862 in a village called Abermule in Mid Wales, just 2 miles from my home. But they suffered centuries of habitat loss and persecution, and more recently, hybridization with feral and domestic cats. And now they're said to be functionally extinct in the wild. What does that mean? Well, it means that without human interference, they would die out. But here in Allerdale, they're not going to let that happen. Oh no, they've set up a captive breeding programme with the Royal Zoological Society of Scotland and an organisation called Saving Wildcats. So I went along with Ranger Ryan Munro, who's in charge of the work here, to have a look around. Oh, it's a nice setup you've got here. Lovely setup. Plenty of room for the cats as well, isn't there? Lots of room for them.
Yeah, we've got these walkways as well, which means they can go to whichever one they want to, so they don't want to be next to each other, they can go to the opposite end. Tomcats especially. You can swap them around and sort of stimulates their brain again, going into different territories and keeps their minds active, you know.
Gotta say, Ryan, it's a lovely looking animal, isn't it? Really
She's beautiful.
Yeah. So that's a female, that
Yeah,
one?
that's one of our females. We have 6 cats here.
Where have they all come from?
All these cats here are all captive breds. They've come from all around the country.
So various zoos and collections and what have you. And why have you got them? What's the purpose of this?
We're an outpost of the Saving Wildcats programme. So any cats that we breed here go into other collections, and then long-term project, they'll hopefully get put into the wild one day.
Because what they're doing is they're looking at suitable areas, aren't they, where hopefully there aren't many feral cats and where there's enough prey, there's enough food, and eventually get them back and try to build up a population again. Can you see that coming, do you think?
Definitely. There's more places that are becoming more available that we can look and go, look, there's areas for free feral cats and stuff, so we can put them in these places, hopefully. And
it'd be nice to see, wouldn't it?
Yeah, nice to see.
How long do you think it's going to take for there to be a viable wild population again? Are we talking sort of decades, tens of years, or is it something?
I think it'll be a bit sooner than that.
Will it?
Hopefully.
Oh, it'd be nice. I'd love to come back up here in, you know, maybe 20, 25 years' time, whatever, you know, and know that there's a healthy population of wildcats, proper Scottish wildcats here. That'd be brilliant, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and hopefully I'll still be here to take you around and we can try and find one.
Wow. Tell you what a cat. Being in the presence of a wildcat, it really is something else. I've only ever seen one in the wild ever. That was in the late 1980s, just south of Inverness. But to be that close to one, it's like the cat, it doesn't look at you, it looks straight through you. Amazing things. So how on earth do you tell the difference then between a tabby and a true wildcat? Well, to be 100% sure, you need to take a sample of blood and look at the DNA. But there are visual clues as well. Let me show you one here. This is a representation here of a truly wild cat and a tabby cat. There are several features. I'm going to pick on 3. First of all, the tail. See the tail? Very, very thick, broad tail with a blunt end and broad bands. Next, this dorsal line down here, an unbroken dorsal line that ends at the start of the tail. And finally, these lines on the flanks, they're unbroken lines. You look at the tabby cat, they're all broken, they're dots and dashes. So those are 3 of the main features that they always look out for. Now, I've got some exciting news for you, some really exciting news. It's bad news, of course, functionally extinct in the wild, but here at Allerdale, we have a kitten. We have a wild cat kitten. Look at that. All of you at home now are going to be going, oh, how cute is that? Well, it's beautiful. It's got those lovely grey eyes, but I tell you one thing, I would not put my hand in there. But isn't that brilliant news? It brought a smile to all of our faces when we saw that. That is absolutely brilliant. And I'll be bringing you updates throughout the series. Now, when you feel stressed and under the weather, I bet you've got a go-to place. Well, mine is going to be something like this. Look, we've got the deciduous woodlands here. I've got a babbling brook. I've got willow warblers singing up above me. But for Arjun Dutta, it's the natural sounds of South London.
Sound is special to me because when I'm stressed or I've had a lot going on, being able to go outside and just listen to things and to take a step back from maybe mental health if I'm struggling there, or I just need some time alone, and being able to go out and record things just makes me feel peaceful and just happy again, really. The mindfulness it brings is really, really powerful, and I think that's why sound is something that means so much to me. Ever since I was 7, when my mum got fed up with me liking football and dinosaurs, she got me into bird watching and gave me a pair of binoculars to go and get involved with big garden bird watch. And since then I've become hooked. My eyesight isn't as sharp as others. It means that often something distant I might not spot as easily, but by sound I can try and spot them.
Today is a big day. Arjun is testing some sound equipment he's specially created at home.
This is my self-made parabolic dish, and essentially I've got my sound recorder attached to the bowl right in the centre, and all the sound from the area around goes straight in to the bowl and centres around the middle, which means it picks up the most amount of sound possible.
The perfect place to test out his new kit is Beddington Farmlands, a landfill and sewage works in the process of being transformed into a nature reserve.
We're right in the heart of South London, and on my right I've got a key main road in the local area, while on my left I've got Chiff Chaff Nest building. Being able to listen to bird sound as well is almost like an escape from the machinery that you hear, the human noise.
The variety of habitats here are proving perfect for the trial of the homemade parabolic.
That was loud. I've just had Chetty's warbler calling in the reed beds in front of me, which was very nice. Little grebe. I'm currently listening to a reed warbler that would have just arrived in from Africa in the last few days or weeks. I like to think reed warblers are one of the sounds of the spring when you come to a water body, because generally you only hear them from April towards the end of August when they leave again. Reed beds are quite difficult to look into. You've got high reeds, quite dense. Often sound is nice because you can find things in there that you might not actually see.
It isn't just at the reed beds where sound provides an insight.
Behind me I can hear in the woodland blackcap. At the moment, plenty have been arriving in from the continent and Africa after a few overwintered here, which means suddenly, after only a handful of them present a couple of weeks ago, now there are absolutely tons of them.
There's one other species that Arjun is desperate to record, but to get close, you have to be very quiet.
I'm hoping to record some lapwings, which are breeding locally, so hopefully we'll get some nice calls from them.
Lapwing are very sensitive to disturbance, so the best strategy is to just wait. Eventually, patience pays off.
Given my makeshift parabolic only took me a very short amount of time to make and for very little, I'm very pleased with the outcome of it. Very pleased to come away with some pretty good sound recordings of them, especially given where I am in South London. There aren't many other places around here where we've got declining birds such as lapwing. I think it's amazing how you can go from being somewhere where you've got ambulances driving past and constant traffic from roads to going onto a nature reserve where you've got a red list species there. It just shows you that you can never predict anything when it comes to wildlife in urban areas.
There is one sound that I am absolutely fascinated with, and I'm sure Arjun would love to record. Now, this is a sound that was once heard right across the country, but has vanished. Now, take a listen to this and see if you know what this sound is. It's almost completely disappeared from the British countryside. This is the corncrake, the call of the corncrake. Now, this is a bird that is in the same family as the moorhens, as coots, as water rails, but unlike these water birds, this corncrake, all corncrakes, much prefer to be skulking around in tall vegetation on dry land. Now, they arrive here in the spring from overwintering grounds in Africa, and they once thrived on traditional farmland, but as farming practices have changed over the last few hundred years, their numbers have absolutely plummeted, and by the 1990s there were only a few hundred males in Western Scotland and in parts of Ireland as well. And in 2009, here in Northern Ireland, there were just 2 males left. But on Rathlin Island, which is just off the north coast of Northern Ireland, a project, a habitat regeneration project that's been running for a little over a decade now, has been trying to encourage them back to the island, and it's all about these plants here. Just your bog standard nettles. And last month we caught up with RSPB's Liam McFall to find out more about this project.
These birds, they are globally threatened, and if we don't manage the habitat, stabilise the populations, we could lose them completely. They're very secretive birds, like tall vegetation to hide in, and one of the things that grows very early in the springtime is nettles, and that's a favourite hiding place for them, so they can weave their way through without coming into the open. And it also hosts a lot of invertebrates and insects there that is the food source. So we've been planting nettles here on the edges of the fields. First of all, we lightly cultivate the ground, then lay the rhizomes down and then overlay it with a compost. We use composted silage bales, and the nutrients from that compost goes down into the ground, and the nettles love it and they just take off. They're site faithful, so if a chick was born on Rathlin, it will come back again to the same spot. So when you lose your own population of birds from an island, then you're dependent on possibly an overflow from somewhere else to recolonise and start it all off again. So when we do get one calling here, it's so important that we protect the habitat, and that way if it produces young, they'll be imprinted on Rathlin and come straight back to Rathlin and hopefully build up a sustainable population.
Now, the project's success has meant that male birds have been returning year on year, and they've even managed to photograph some males while they're calling. Like this male in 2019, this was photographed while it was actually calling, and then again in 2020, they photographed a different male also calling. But the story doesn't end there. Just this year, literally the day after we caught up with Paul, they recorded one male calling, and then almost immediately another male started calling, and another, until there were 4 males calling on the same day. Now, this is the most number of males they've had calling in 40 years on the island, and they think that 2 of them have actually paired up with a mate. So the hope is that they will successfully raise a brood, and wouldn't that be something? Chris and Michaela, can you imagine hearing a corncrake calling over Wild Ken Hill?
Well, Gillian, we don't need to imagine it because we can reproduce it ourselves.
A cacophony of corncrakes.
You've been practising, haven't you? The reason we're doing this is that many years ago in the 1980s, when I first travelled to the Western Isles to hope to see corncrakes, I couldn't see them. Someone came up to me and said, get a comb and a coin, go and stand in the nettles and go. So I did, and guess what? Nothing happened. I just looked like an eccentric bloke standing in a pack of, a whole mess of nettles going like this with a comb. It didn't work.
I can't imagine you looking like an eccentric bloke.
Nor can I. Nor can I. Now, corncrakes are one of those farmland birds which, rather like the partridges that we mentioned earlier, have been in critical decline. I was having a chat to a friend of mine, Keith Betton, who's the chairman of the Hampshire Ornithological Society, a couple of months ago, and he said, how do you fancy a day out looking for one of the UK's weirdest and wackiest birds? Well, how could I resist that? As soon as the lockdown restrictions eased, I headed off with Keith for a weird and wacky day at a secret spot in the Hampshire countryside. To say that I'm treading carefully is an understatement.
You've got about 10 or 12 fence posts to pass.
Copy that.
OK, walk towards me now, Chris.
Because the last thing I want to be doing is treading on eggshells.
Okay, straighten up towards me now.
I've got them, Keith. They're right in front of me. Absolutely superb. Come on out. Look at that. I mean, I say look at that. You'll have to strain your eyes. They are so brilliantly camouflaged. And it's been a long time since I've seen a pair as beautiful as this. They are absolutely superb. They're the eggs of the one and only, the truly enigmatic and bizarre stone curlew. Stone curlews are not, in fact, curlews. They just have a similar call. Their large yellow eyes allow them to forage for invertebrates by night, and their preferred habitat is dry and open, with bare, stony ground, where their eggs are very well camouflaged. Stone curlews are extremely rare summer visitors, with only about 350 pairs breeding here each year, so every nest counts. OK, Keith, what's the plan?
Well, the plan here, Chris, is first of all I'm going to photograph this nest because we're going to touch these eggs, we're going to weigh them, and I need to be able to put them back in exactly the same positions so that these birds won't even realise that we've been here and touched them. So they are, as you say, fantastically beautiful. If you just pick up this one...
I'm going to put my glasses on.
You'll feel it's warm because the female's been sitting on them already.
Oh, yeah, they're nice and warm, yeah. There is more than one nest on this site, so data is collected from all of them. That's 50.3.
Yeah, the wind is blowing it a bit, but it's 36.6.
36.6 grams.
Hear the birds calling, they're watching us.
I can. Every egg we take measurements from is replaced exactly where it was. And quickly. We can't stay here for long. Let's beat it.
Superb.
At this stage, expectant parents need to incubate their eggs around the clock. But how long before they hatch? Keith's data can give us the answer. Now, I have to stress that Keith and his team working from the Hampshire Ornithological Society are extremely experienced and, of course, they're licensed to handle those eggs and look at these birds.
His data, though, did give us the answer, didn't it? By using this incredibly clever graph that I've got here, we can use the length and breadth. Now, I'm not quite sure how this works, this whole graph, but just trust me, it does. So draw a line between the length of the egg and the breadth. And what are you doing? Get your finger out. And the weight of the egg, and the green line crosses the red line. You cannot leave it alone, can you? This is my graph. You keep your social distance and you stay over there. And then the line crosses through the date to hatching. As I say, I've no idea how all this was worked out, but it does work. So it tells us that the eggs are going to hatch in 5 to 6 days' time, and that was exactly right.
It was exactly right. But why would they want to know when those eggs were hatching? After all, they could just let them hatch and then monitor the chicks. Well, it's all to do with the fact that this is on a working farm, and the farm has to continue to work alongside those stone curlews. So if you know when they are going to hatch, you can then do all of that operation, perhaps with heavy machinery, around the eggs because they're not moving. But as soon as the chicks hatch, let's have a look at them. As soon as they hatch, this is what they look like. They're really, really hard to see. You're not going to spot those from a tractor as you're moving across the field. So the benefit is, of course, that once you know when they're going to hatch, you can then go into the field if any operations have to take place. And that's exactly what Keith did with these birds, and those were the birds that the birds that actually came from those eggs that we were looking at. And here he lifted one of them very, very carefully out of the way of that farm machinery into a spot in the field where it wasn't going to be crushed and damaged, and therefore it's still thriving. Keith Betton, stone curlew superhero.
And those stone curlews are amazing, aren't they? They've got such mesmerising eyes. But I've got to tell you, we've been mesmerised by something standing in this field, haven't we? Because we've seen these extraordinary, they look like tornadoes, and they're just full of, are they midges or are they gnats? Or
I don't know,
but
I've never seen
it. It's like watching the Northern Lights And they're just coming down in these swirling, as Chris said, tornadoes. And look, there are some, I mean, they're quite difficult. I don't know if we're getting close-ups of them. But this would be a great night to be a swallow, wouldn't it?
Oh,
to just come out and get right into those.
Cora, before we go, I mean, we've never seen that
No, we've
tornadoes
never
before.
seen it
So
before.
if any of you out there know what's going on here, we'd love to know, ready for next week.
Well, that's certainly taken our attention away, but let's take a moment of calm for a mindful moment. Now, this is shot by Ian Llewellyn and Jack Johnson, and they went into the Somerset levels. So let's transport ourselves to the beauty and the wildlife of the Avalon Marshes.
Drumming snipe. Those marshes are not just a brilliant place for wildlife, but you can also soak up the history there as well. You can feel it. It's a very ancient landscape. You can transport yourself back to 878 when Alfred the Great was hiding from the Vikings there and burning the cakes.
Should we have a quick look at our live cameras before? I mean, we're nearly at the end of the programme, aren't we?
Go on then.
So let's have a look.
You pick.
OK, well, I'm going to actually introduce you very quickly to a new one that you can keep your eyes on over the weekend. And this is it. It's our sedge warbler. We haven't said hello to it yet, but I'm going to give you a very quick look at that now. We think it's sitting on 5 chicks. It's in the borders of the wetlands and the scrub. Let's just take a very quick look at all the nests so we can really soak them up before we go. And as I say, you can keep your eyes on those over the weekend. Lots of them to enjoy. And of course, it's the bank holiday weekend, so it's the end of the week for us. We won't be back until Tuesday, and this is what we've got coming up then. We will be looking at the spring weather and seeing how that has affected all of our wildlife.
I'm going to be on the trail of one of our coolest upland birds.
And I'll be keeping a close eye on some curious curlew here in Northern Ireland.
And if you can't get enough of Springwatch, then of course you can watch those live cameras from 10 in the morning until 10 at night. We'd love to hear from you. If you've got any questions about what's going on in those nests, do ask us. And anything you see, post it on our Twitter, Facebook or Instagram. And lastly, we'll be back on Instagram Live at 1 o'clock most days next week. Until then, see you next Tuesday. Good night.
Bye-bye.